Hi there, and welcome to Unfiltered Solopreneur, the podcast where we share real, unvarnished stories of people who dared to break free from the corporate grind. I'm your host, Nikhil, and I'm passionate about helping solopreneurs like you turn their dreams into reality. Can a corporate downsizing ignite a revolution? In this episode, Neelu Kaur shares how she went from being escorted out of a corporate office to standing on global stages, teaching others to speak up, stand tall, and shut down the imposter monster. We talk about redefining value, embracing the messy middle, and why posting raw, imperfect content might just be your most powerful strategy. If you're building your voice as you build your business, this one's for you. Enjoy, and I will see you on the other side. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm Nikhil Vesh, your host, founder and CEO of Boost Solo. My guest today went from boardrooms to big stages, a self-advocacy champion who turned getting downsized into a personal revolution, helping others find their voice, own their power, and be their own damn cheerleader. Neelu, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have you here, and I'm excited for our conversation. Now, you mentioned me that your journey started in the corporate world before you made the leap to solopreneurship. So, was there a defining moment when you said, "That's it, I'm done working for others, and I want to be on my own"? And what made that clear to you?
Yes, there was absolutely a defining moment. And that defining moment came with many experiences leading up to that moment. So the moment that it was sort of an eye-opening experience for me was in 2013. I was downsized from a very large company. And as I was being escorted out by a security guard, so I felt like a criminal. I really felt like this is not for me. I do not want to have my future in someone else's hands. And at this point, I had been downsized numerous times or fired. And I realized like something's got to change. I cannot do this. I cannot keep doing this. That's the definition of insanity.
Right. Yeah, no, and it's a horrible experience. And in fact, one of the things I wanted to ask you too is like you mentioned being downsized multiple times, right? And that's obviously always a horrible experience and it takes a mental toll. But can you tell me a little bit about how it's shaped the way you approach work today?
Yes, I think one of the things that helped me when I was let go from that organization was I was determined to have my own practice and I didn't know how to do that. So I felt like I needed crutches. And so my crutches were really working with other organizations that were doing the business development. And so I was on their bench as a facilitator, a coach, a trainer, even speaker. And so I got the reps in, I honed my craft. And I think that because I sort of didn't jump right into solopreneurship, I was working with so many different companies and representing them, I was able to fine tune my craft of speaking. It's really how it set the stage for me doing what I do today.
Okay, so I mean, so were these like side hustles, or help us understand what sort of work you were doing at the time?
Not a side hustle. So I did have my own LLC, but what
Okay,
I mean is I wasn't going B2B. I was as a consultant or working as a contractor for many of these organizations. And so I worked for many of them
got it.
and I was hustling. I was traveling around the country, traveling around North America, sometimes even internationally, and teaching other people's content or facilitating other content or coaching through their name versus my own. And so while I was doing that, I was honing my craft, my skill, and also thinking about, okay, how am I going to create my own IP on this? What is it that I'm going to bring to the world? And so it just gave me a place to have a launching pad. So I wasn't thrust into becoming a speaker overnight or having my own contextual models or frameworks. I had a ramp up period, and that ramp up period was quite a long time for me. So for everyone, it's very different. And I think oftentimes when people leave their organizations, they think they're going to become an overnight superstar. And I don't know if that happens. If it does, please tell me how that happens, because for me, it's taken years and I'm still not a superstar. But I think that it wasn't this overnight journey.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that, because there is this myth out there that if you build it, they will come. And one of my pet phrases, and I think we talked about it: if you build it, they will not come. But
Right.
but I like the way you put on training wheels, right? Because I did something similar too. It's like, so it sounded like you had the seed, you wanted to do this on your own, and you were just sort of going out and figuring out what is that thing that you can bring to the world that provides value.
Right. Right. And also when you are working in this capacity, I mean, yes, you can get fired. They can say,
Yeah.
oh, you're not good at what you're doing. But that didn't happen. So there was a mental shift for me where it was like, I knew I was working for myself because I was honing my craft, even though I was under their, say, umbrella. I just knew that there was this light at the end of the tunnel. And I think for me as a solopreneur, when I'm working for myself, I have endless amounts of motivation. But when I'm internal in an organization, for me, there's a lack of motivation.
So you've spoken about the motivation shift. You mentioned that a minute ago, dramatically changing from an employee to a solopreneur. So when you actually made the leap, can you tell us what sort of the biggest challenge was, and also what the biggest positive surprise or the best positive surprise was?
I remember as an employee, I would be asked to be at meetings like at 7:30 in the morning, which to me is a horrible experience. I'm not a morning person. And having to, schlep to Manhattan, I live in Queens, like getting there was like, wow, this is pointless. What am I doing? And yet, as a solopreneur, I facilitate, I do a lot of speaking engagements globally at different times of the day. And I somehow magically am able to do that. So I know that there's a shift that happened. And for me, it was really about, this is my message. I think it's important in the world. I don't think I had that autonomy as an employee. And I think when I had the autonomy, it's like, okay, now let me figure out what my message is. And then there's this intrinsic motivation that just happened for me.
All right, so let's talk about branding. But that's an
Yes.
area I love talking about. So self-advocacy and psychologically safe cultures are pillars of your brand. Now, coaching is a very crowded, and consulting and coaching is a very competitive and crowded category, right? So how did you land on self-advocacy as your distinct edge, and what told you that would resonate?
Nikhil, it wasn't something that was like this light bulb moment. It was
Mm.
as I was writing Be Your Own Cheerleader, I really didn't know where it was going to go. So most people, what they do is they think about their frameworks and their contextual models and what their IP is, and then they write a book. But that wasn't actually the case for me. I wrote the book first, and then I figured it out. I never seem to go in sequential order of the way things should be done. It's not been a linear path for me. So when I was writing Be Your Own Cheerleader, I was taking in my own experiences, also people and professionals that I've coached over all these years. And I realized, this is a big challenge, not just for Asians and South Asians, but for people that are extremely neurodivergent or extremely introverted, right? Like there are people out there that struggle with self-advocacy for a variety of reasons. And when I realized that it's not just a subsection of a group of people, it actually broadly applies to a lot of people, I started speaking about it, and then it just caught on. And now I notice there are so many speakers speaking about self-advocacy, and it's a topic that I get people that inbound requests by just typing in self-advocacy, which wasn't a thing when I started writing Be Your Own Cheerleader.
Right. Yeah. People didn't talk about that stuff as much,
Right.
right? So,
Right.
but you also sort of pushed out on your own then, right? I mean, you sort of carved out a niche fearlessly, because a lot of people sort of jump on the trend or the bandwagon and think that they can add value there, right? But it gets very cluttered. So how did you how did you decide you'd want to make that leap?
Because it was such a struggle for me. And
Yeah.
I realized like, it's not just me, there's so many people out there that struggle with it.
Yeah.
So let's create a Be Your Own Cheerleader keynote, and let's create Be Your Own Cheerleader, like taking the leadership development pieces that I'd already created and branding it under this amplifying your voice and advocating for your ideas. And so shifting slightly with the curriculum, shifting slightly with the messaging, and then bringing it to life under the Be Your Own Cheerleader brand, if you will.
And so could you tell us, I love that. I love how you did. And I also love how it wasn't sequential, right? Because I think that I think is one of the joys and beauties of solopreneurship you have to embrace too, right? That things don't happen in a
Absolutely.
neat, linear sort of domino effect kind of way. And you've just got to sort of roll with the punches, see the opportunities and leap on them. So what would you say early on was your toughest marketing challenge or hurdle? And was there like an aha moment for you to overcome that?
I think the challenge for a lot of solopreneurs is coming up with something original.
Yeah.
They think that it has to be original. I used to think, well, who would be interested in this? It's not really original. Does anyone even care about this? And so we are our own worst critic. And I think if you have something you're working on, it's a contextual model, it's a framework, just play with it, be out in the world with it, and you will iterate. It's never final. It's never going to be perfect. And that's the other lesson that I learned, because I'm a recovering perfectionist. It's like everything has to be done and neatly packaged. And I think as a solopreneur, that for me has never been the case, because I'm constantly changing and iterating. And I think that's an important thing to note is that it's never, whatever you're working on, it's never going to feel complete. So just keep going, keep moving forward, make some steps, and that's sufficient.
Yeah, and that's also great advice, because you're right. Because until you put it out there, you're also not going to know what's working, what's not working, what's resonating, what's not, right?
Right. And in fact, in the speaking world, they often say before you invest all of this time and energy in writing a book, go out and speak about it and then iterate with your audience, like feedback that you get, and then write your book. And so now I know better, so I'll do better. So the next book I write, whenever that will be, it'll be a new concept, but I will have played around with it more than just writing, which is what I did at first. So I think we are always constantly learning. There's no right formula for success. It's just whatever feels right for you in the moment. And I think for me, it felt right to really work on my book. And then COVID happened. So I had a lot of downtime.
Right.
And then I really focused on writing. So again, it was a time thing too. It was a place we were in history. And so I capitalized on that.
Yeah, but also what I love about what you did was, even though it wasn't sort of like conventional wisdom, you still were talking about a deeply personal experience, right?
Right.
And I think that's one of the things solopreneurs don't realize, is a lot of what happens to all of us is very common, right? It's not unique, and we're all dealing with these things, even if nobody's talking about them. So I think it takes courage to step out there, and that's, I think, why your unlinear sequence also worked, because it clearly touched a chord with a lot of people who were going through the same thing, feeling the same thing, but not talking about it.
Yeah. And I think I used to beat myself up that, like, why can't it just be an easier path? Like, why is it, why are things so challenging? And it's not necessarily that it's challenging. It's just, I'm constantly playing around with different ideas. And so, yeah, it's never been a linear path for me.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know if you know Sahil Bloom, but he mentioned this phrase last week that I heard, which I loved, which is, he called it working in the darkness.
Mhm.
And he said you sort of spend a lot of time as a solopreneur working in the dark, right?
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Because it's you and your mind. And so that's another reason why I think, having a cohort or a group of other solopreneurs, a support system is so helpful, because then you can bounce ideas off of each other and you're not in this bubble of yourself. Because when you're just in your own bubble, you might think this is the greatest idea in the world, and then it can flop in public. So having partners to talk through with this is I think so helpful.
and honestly, that's the only thing I miss about the corporate world, is not having a sounding board, right? And that's one of
Right.
the goals with Boost Solo, is to create that community of.
Yes, absolutely. It's so needed. I'm lucky enough to be part of a few cohorts, and so we can bounce ideas off of each other in different capacities. And so without that, it would be a very lonely journey.
Yeah, and also it's less fun, I think.
Yeah.
Iterating by yourself, putting sticky notes on a wall alone is not as much fun as with a room full of people.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. But there's actually a place and time for those solo moments and the sticky
mhm.
notes, I think, when you are coming up with something and just allowing yourself to dream big, because we often just stop it. As adults, I say, we're tragically adults. We just stop our creativity and our innovation and our innovative ideas. And so when we do have those moments of solo time to really think through, I think those sticky notes are so helpful in those times.
True, the deep work, right? But then
Yeah,
you've got to shed some light on it too. So.
absolutely.
So the other thing which I thought was really interesting we talked about was the tension between we and I, right? And especially coming from a culture that values humility. So how do you balance showcasing your work and your value without feeling like you're showing off?
This is such a big topic in the work that I do, and I use the metaphor of a speedometer in a car, which is using a dial. So there's a we part and an I part, right? And so contextually, you switch. You turn up or turn down the we or the I based on who's in front of you. So, for example, as a solopreneur, we're often on business development calls, right? And it may feel uncomfortable for us to talk about ourselves, our credentials, our accomplishments, but that's the context of this call, is to sell yourself.
Yeah.
So you just turn up the I, and then that conversation is finished, you then go back to your we, which is where you may feel comfortable. And so when I know that it's just a short period of time and it's a contextual thing, it allows me to flex. And so I talk about this a lot, is that I'm still authentic to who I am, but I'm just shifting and I'm flexing in the moment based on who's in front of me. And obviously, as a solopreneur, we're constantly on business development calls where we do have to sell our services, and no one can sell our services better than we can. And that's when we have to turn up the I.
Yeah, no, I love that analogy. And I love how you sort of, accelerate and decelerate. But then how do you deal with the social media piece, right? Because I feel like most of social media, no matter what anyone says, is a lot of self-aggrandizement, right? And you kind of have to be out there today because, like you said, we have to be selling our services because, we're constantly, sales is a key component of what we do when we're on our own. So do you have any tips on how
I
you,
do.
yeah,
I do. I always think about this question is it that, or even when I'm a receiver, as I'm reviewing materials from other speakers or other people on LinkedIn, I ask myself, does this feel like they are showing off, or are they showcasing their like thought leadership and visionary thoughts? Because I want to hear their visionary thoughts and their thought leadership. So when then I'm creating content and working with my team that helps me create content, I always use that filter. It's like, am I showing off, or am I really helping others? This one sentence in this one post might be so helpful to someone. So I definitely want to put this sentence out there. So I think when we decipher between, are we just trying to make ourselves feel better and post these pictures of us looking amazing, or are we offering something that might help someone? Because if we help someone, that to me is like the point of at least LinkedIn. I know there's other platforms where, the desired impact is different. But I think with LinkedIn, we really want to make sure that we are seen and looked at as thought leaders in the space that we're in.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is. Yeah, you're right. I love that lens. It's like, are you providing some sort of value to somebody, even
Right.
if you're showcasing your expertise by doing that, right? Without
Right.
having to say, hey, look who I am, or create a dance video.
Although I love those dance videos. I love watching those dance videos. I often wish I could do that. I'm like, it takes courage to put those dance videos out there. So,
True.
and
But
sometimes those dance videos make me feel so happy. Like I can have a bad day and look at one of those cute dance videos, and then all of a sudden I have a smile on my face. So I think they serve a purpose too.
well, I think they do too. It's just they see you need to have the separation. It's like sort of,
Yes.
your personal
Yes.
life, your business life. Similarly, I see those as like, don't be
Well,
on TikTok if your clients are not. Yeah.
interestingly, I've seen some posts on LinkedIn where there have been so many comments of people saying, this is too personal. This is not what LinkedIn is for. Right. So again, it's identifying for yourself what you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, and I think also connecting that with what your clients are looking for, right? I think
Right.
you sort of have to connect those two dots. And again, it's like, and I think, and maybe I don't put words in your mouth, but don't jump on the bandwagon, right? Do what is comfortable for you, no matter what
Absolutely.
everyone else is doing, and what makes sense for your business and for your clientele ultimately, right? That's how you.
Absolutely. And also, if it's online, it's basically there forever. So you want to be really intentional with what you put out there, because your client can Google you and then find things that maybe you're like, oh no, I shouldn't have put that up, or I shouldn't have this out there. So again, that's another thing that you want to be thoughtful about.
True, it is forever. I don't think people think about that. So the other thing I wanted to ask you is, you've talked about sort of the I and the we, but the other aspect of it is you also work with individuals and you work with organizations, right? And that's a pretty big range. So how do you shape your message to ensure that it connects with both audiences without sort of watering down the core principles?
So I think of it as like a funnel or a pyramid. So
Yeah.
let's say I'm doing a keynote, and from the keynote, it's at a conference, and then there's breakout sessions, which are much more skills based, workshopy. And then from those, perhaps there are people that say, hey, I want to work with you one on one. So my primary work is really keynotes and workshops. And then if I get one on one clients, great. But my energy is definitely with larger groups and teams. And so the one on one really, again, it's skills based. It might be a woman who struggles with speaking up, or maybe she wants a different position in the organization. So it's about internal mobility, and she feels like the loudest voice in the room is always heard. So she wants to work with me on her executive presence. So that might be an example of someone one-on-one. And then with organizations, it can be, there's an event for recently International Women's Day. So I did an engagement at a company for that. And so again, it really depends, but I would say that the individuals come through that funnel of keynotes and then workshops.
Got it. Yeah, no, and I think that's a great point because you have a point of focus,
Right.
but that doesn't mean you turn away other people, right? That's what I think a lot of solopreneurs don't understand is when you focus, it doesn't mean you're shutting the door to other opportunities or people.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
but
You're
it's
just,
important. Yeah,
yeah, the lens is just you're widening or narrowing the lens based on, again, who's in front of
right. So a number of something a number of solopreneurs have told me is that their message resonates really strongly, gets an emotional connection, but it doesn't always translate into clients and revenue, right? It's that old problem of like, I get a lot of likes, but I'm not converting. So have you ever run into that mismatch where people love your message, but are hesitating to invest?
Of course. I mean, that's, I think that's the case with everyone. Every solopreneur has dealt with that. And I don't have an answer for that. I don't have a magic formula of what works, but I can say I have this one example of this video I had posted a few years ago on LinkedIn. It was literally from my phone. It was not edited. It was not polished, but one person saw it. And that one person, it led to thousands and thousands of dollars of work. So
Wow.
I think, yeah. So I think we over engineer. We want to make things look beautiful and we want to edit to death. And then it's like, wait, this one message led to so much work. So we never really know. It's kind of a game, and it's like, make it fun for yourself. Experiment with the types of posts that you do and see what resonates.
Yeah, again, going back to what you were saying earlier, it's sort of you have to put yourself out there and experiment with different things, right? And I think raw authenticity also is something a lot of people are looking for right now, right? Because we have so much cosmetic perfection in social media. So I think those things will cut through better. But
Right.
yeah.
Right. So, and I get trapped into that where I'm like, oh, my team needs to edit this, make it look better, clean this up. And usually those videos don't really do well, or those posts don't do well. It's like when you're you and when you're just sharing your message, I think that's when those posts do better.
Yeah. And also, I think it's good to have a call to action, right? Like, have some point of action in the video that, like you said, either some value or some outtake will usually help. Because a lot of people connect with a personal message, but then you got to also give them some off ramp to say, okay, what do you want me to do next, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And playing around with that. Because if you have every post you do is a call to action to reach out,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's watered down too, right? So it's not, there's no exact science. I wish there was. And I've taken so many workshops from so many experts in this. And I don't think that there's a magic formula for 30% these kind of posts, 20%. Like, no, I don't think it works. I think you just have to experiment.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who tell you that, oh, come to us and we'll, drive your
Yes,
conversion and we'll do 20x. And like, I'm like, if there was a formula, then every Scorsese film would be a super hit. So
exactly.
clearly there
Exactly.
isn't.
There's
Yeah.
no magic formula.
No. And that's what protects us from AI too, is that we are imperfect that way, right? So yeah.
Right. And one other thing that I think is so helpful, and I have to constantly ask myself this because I got this from training that I've received, is that if you can answer a question that Google can't answer, that sets you up to be a visionary leader. Because now with Chat GPT and
Yeah.
AI, you can sound like an expert, but is it curated information that everyone has posted on the internet, or is it something really unique and valuable from your own lens and experience?
Yeah, and yeah, I agree. You're talking about the life experience that you bring, which is the
Right,
unique lens, right? With
right,
neither Google nor AI can do.
right.
So have you found AI sort of encroaching on your work at all? Or have people sort of like been telling you that they're using AI? Because I was reading an article earlier this week in Axios that like and maybe this may be younger generations, some like 50% of Gen Z now are relying on AI for like advice, like serious like health, emotional relationship, rather than a human, because they say it understands them better.
I mean, I use it to research things just
Yeah.
because again, it's a lot of information and you can gain a lot of insight. So I use it from a research perspective. I don't necessarily think it encroaches on my work. I actually think other speakers that speak about self-advocacy, it is a compliment. It is a compliment that this is out there and that I'm validated in the fact that I think this is an important topic. And also, we all have a different approach and a different lens about it. So I don't feel like it's a competitive thing. And so I definitely don't think AI is encroached. I think my experience is very unique to me. And we should all use AI for assistance in research and things like that. So I do think that there's a benefit of using AI.
Oh, I agree, but I see it as a tool, not a companion, right? That's why I
Right,
sort of like it's not a substitute for human intervention and human
right,
interaction,
right.
which is
I mean,
where
I
I
actually read something recently where more and more Gen Z, they're actually having relationships with.
yes,
So that to me is like, I don't know, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, because they find it easier because it's
Right,
too messy to have real human relationships
right,
because they disagree.
right.
So, but
Yeah,
maybe
that's
that's
another topic.
another podcast.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, right? A
Mm,
lot of solopreneurs have mentioned that to me. Now, as a coach or as a person who talks about you're a cheerleader for other people who sort of wrestle with self-doubt and need to advocate for themselves. So what's your go-to strategy to sort of pull yourself out of that mode?
I have a handful because, we often teach what we need the most. And I
Yeah.
think for me, I really deal a lot with this critical voice. And I believe every human being at some point in their life deals with this. So I actually disagree with calling it a syndrome as well. I think if every human being at some point in their life has suffered from this, it's like it's not so much a syndrome. I call it the imposter monster. I think we all have it. And I think the louder, sometimes the monster is really loud and sometimes it's more quiet. And so there's different strategies that I use. And some basic ones are movement. Like one of the things that happens is typically when the imposter monster is really, really loud, it's because we are ruminating about the past or catastrophizing about the future. So oftentimes movement and getting into your body actually quiets the voice. So if you're in a difficult conversation or you read something that triggered you or you're having a conversation that's triggered you, it's like get up, move around and get in your body and then you're back in the present moment. So anything that you can do using your five senses to get back in the present moment is actually a strategy to sort of decrease the loud voice.
And I agree, though. I think I agree with you. There are people who've told me that, I've never suffered from imposter syndrome, right? And of course, they're always men, but I agree with you. I'm like, if you're human, you will suffer it. And I almost feel like, I was talking to a younger person today, and I was like, I don't think it's age related. It's every time you do something new or try something new or step out of your comfort zone, you're gonna feel it. Because I've had so many career pivots, and I felt it at every stage of my life.
Or even if you're in middle school and you
Yeah.
don't do well in kickball or something, I don't know, but you feel bad about yourself and you might say, oh God, I suck at this. And that is an imposter monster. So if someone says to me they've never experienced it, I'm like, I don't know. I think you have, and I think it's just not in your conscious awareness.
Or maybe you're a sociopath. That's the other
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
Yeah. So I love the imposter monster. You should in my head immediately I had a series that you could create, like an animated series about the imposter monster and how to deal with it. But you should definitely do that.
I mean, I think a lot about that. Like that might just double, like I hate to be corporate speak, which is double click down on this, but I do think that double clicking on the imposter monster could be, recipe for another different type of keynote or book number 2 or something, because it comes up so frequently and it comes up across the board. So men, women, all ages, all backgrounds, like I think it's something we all deal with.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think we don't talk about it enough, right? Especially because the veneer of success sort of washes away everything else, right? And we
Right.
get so fixated with that you forget that they've still gone through everything you're going through before they got there. And even after they got there, sometimes it's worse when you're there, right? Because the expectations just get bigger. So, yeah.
So that's one strategy, is just like getting back in your body and getting into the present moment. I think there's so many other strategies. Like for example, for me, I don't know if this is the case for you, but it's easy for me to be someone else's cheerleader. Like
Right.
I can like hype someone up so well, and it's can be a struggle to hype myself up. So one of the strategies is hyping yourself up in third person. Because when
Mhm.
you move into third person, it's like you're not talking about yourself. You're saying, Neelu did this. Neelu just finished this. Neelu just published this. And it's like until you feel comfortable, then you can move into first person.
I love that, and I'm probably going to use that because
Yeah,
it is something I struggle with.
right.
And then I'm like, wow, Nikhil did all of that.
Exactly. And it's so easy to say that Nick Hill did it versus saying, I did this.
Right.
So when
True.
you start, it's like a shift, even spatially reframe. Like once you do it in a location in your home and you feel comfortable, and then maybe step to the right and say, I did it, and see how that feels until you feel comfortable saying it out loud in front of people.
Yeah, no, I love that. And so the other thing I want to talk about, you mentioned also in terms of like, the journey, that in our pre-call that, solopreneurship is also a financial roller coaster, right? So
Yeah.
can you share a story of a particularly challenging period and sort of the biggest lessons you took away from it?
I have been through that challenging period so many times. And I think one of the biggest lessons for me is to remind myself that this too shall pass. This
Right.
too shall pass. Like it's going to happen, or it has always happened at certain points. And so it is past and I've succeeded beyond that. So a constant reminder, and even going back and thinking through and asking myself, what did I do in that last time that helped me get through it? because I am my own coach in this because I've been through it. So it's like, and sometimes it's even helpful to document. Like I remember keeping a note on my phone of like all of the things that I did during down periods that helped me pivot so that I always have that there and it can remind me that if that time comes again.
Yeah, that's great. And it also just sort of makes it, I guess it takes the boogeyman out of it when you write it down, right? There's something
Right.
that happens with your brain, I think, that absorbs it in a different way, or stores it in a different way, maybe. I don't know.
And I also have a belief that I'll always figure it out.
Right.
I will always figure it out. It might not come that easily, but I will always figure it out. And maybe it comes easily. So I remember COVID was a really down period for me because before COVID, I was in person doing all of these events and that was immediately shut down. And so I realized, okay, now I have to take what I did and all of my IP and be this amazing facilitator and speaker online, which is a different skill set. So then I found a different community, got different training, and then pivoted all of my content and then became so amazing virtually that when we returned to in person, I was like, oh God, I want to stay on my Zoom. Like, so again, it's like this constant need to pivot and the belief that I will figure it out. And I think
Yeah.
solopreneurs, it's a belief you just have to believe you will figure it out.
Yeah, and the other thing that just struck me about writing it down and keeping is you now have a note of the fact that you did figure it out, right?
Exactly.
So it's really great impetus. I love that mechanism of sort of doing that.
Yeah, it's a reminder. It's like a little, it's like your own echo chamber of your successes is
Yeah,
instead of, and going to people that believe in you too. So your echo chamber of people that can hype you up, but also having that little folder or a note to just remind yourself like, hey, these were the steps I took then during COVID. So if I could do it when the whole world was shut down, I can absolutely do it now with XYZ.
true. And you raise a really good point too, because I think some of the most valuable lessons when I look back on my life have come from hardship, because
Yeah.
it tells me that I got through it, right? Versus the high points, which don't sort of linger as much in the long run, I feel.
Right. Absolutely. That's where I think that's where we learn about our character
Yeah.
and we build our resilience muscle.
So when you look back on your journey, what would you say is the most valuable mistake you've made? One that sort of felt disastrous at the time, but turned out to be gold, maybe, or maybe not gold, but just like something totally unexpected.
I mean, interestingly, I think it's what I was telling you before, which is working for all of these different companies and being
Yeah.
on their bench and teaching their IP or coaching their clients. And so at the time, there were moments when I said, I'm getting paid a fraction of what they're getting paid. And so this is not sustainable. Having enough level of dissatisfaction to do something. So then creating my own IP, my own thought leadership. But I think doing that and getting the reps in was really important. And I think had I not done that, I wouldn't feel skilled to do what I do today.
Yeah, and so yeah, again, I like the reference of training wheels, right? Because I think it's a great way to do it, whether it's a side hustle or the way. Because I consulted for 8 or 9 years before I launched Boost Solo too, and I don't think I was ready to do it before that.
Right. You
So,
gain so much insight and knowledge during those 8 years or 9 years, and then you're off to do whatever next. But all of these things, maybe in the time, it feels like why is this isn't working? Why isn't it moving fast enough? But I feel like there's always a reason it's happening, and it's just preparing you for your next thing.
yeah, and I'm a big believer in timing too, right? I mean, I don't mean like sort of lying around and waiting for things to happen,
Right.
but doing and then finding the right opportunities at the right time. It's almost like opportunities show up when you're
Yeah,
ready for them.
absolutely. I call it divine timing, and I think it's present and it's there, and you if it's a belief of yours, it will happen.
Yeah, but I think it's important to put yourself out there, what you were saying earlier, and experiment
Yes.
and try different things and sort of iterate,
Yes.
because otherwise, opportunity is not sitting and waiting to fall from the sky.
That's true.
Yeah,
So not lounging on the couch hoping it changes, but divine timing with action.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
and then it'll work itself out.
yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a great lesson for people listening too. So, if you could change one thing about how people perceive the self-help, and coaching industry, what would it be?
There's nothing wrong with me. I don't need fixing. And
Yeah,
I think that's a lot, especially in the South Asian community. It's like there's a stigma attached to asking for assistance or asking for what you need because you're supposed to be like this professional and strong. And so I think that that's one thing that I wish would change is that there's nothing wrong with you if you need support or assistance. And that could look like therapy, going to a therapist where you're looking in the rearview mirror and investigating your past, or it could be coaching, which is more forward thinking and action related, right? Of moving forward in the right direction. But I think that's one thing that I wish, with the stigma around getting help, it's not a bad thing to ask for help.
Yeah, and you're right. And I think, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but at least in the West, the stigma seems to have diminished greatly, right? Because I remember
Right.
a friend of mine was a coach like 2 years ago. Her clients were not willing to share their names in testimonials, and now they are. So
Yeah.
I think there's been a shift. And then you think about people like Tiger Woods has a coach, and
Right.
it's like,
Right.
and like if he needs one, then everybody else probably needs one. And I'm talking about a mindset coach, right? Not a
Yeah,
swing coach. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's all about the mind.
right.
And so, absolutely, the greatest performers, professionals, they all have coaches, and not just technical coaches, but typically someone that they could just call and say, "Hey, I'm feeling a certain way, and I need support to get out of it."
Yeah. So, if we were to meet again 5 years from now, where would you want to be? What does the future look like for you?
Yeah, I would want to have another book under my belt, and I would be on international stages, maybe a TED talk or two. Let's see, on TV a little more. And I also think for me, it's really important to help the AAPI community feel empowered to be their own cheerleader without any shame and without the belief that it's a selfish act. Because when you are your own cheerleader, you're essentially helping all of the people behind you that look just like you to advocate for themselves, to ask for what they need, to get those promotions and raises. And I think that to me is such an important piece of my work, is that to showcase that being your own cheerleader is the most collective we-based act that you can do, even though it feels very internal and it's about me, but it's actually not.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's a great mission. And also, I love that you said, because being about, and I read a study that, the people who are the happiest are the people who help others,
Right.
because that brings you greater joy than buying stuff or doing stuff for yourself, right? And
Right.
economists have not been able to explain it. There's this glow, and what they found was even anonymous donors receive the same amount of joy as public donors, right? So it's not
Right.
recognition. There's
Right.
something innate that happens. So I think
Right.
I love what you're doing and how you're sort of helping people do that. And the other thing I'd love to see is sort of have your message infiltrate our culture, right? The Eastern culture,
Yes.
because I think it's much needed there.
But also to be true, because there's so many aspects of our culture that are so beautiful. And
Yeah,
I don't want to be the speaker that says, oh, change those things. Absolutely not. I want us to dance effortlessly between the we and the I,
yeah.
because there's so many beautiful things about the we.
Yeah, it's additive, right? And I remember Basim Yusuf summed it. I don't know if you know, he's an Egyptian comedian, but
Mhm.
it stayed with me. He said his mother told him, "You're either a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, or a failure." And that reminds me of something.
Yeah, exactly. Very familiar. But
Yeah,
that's changing too. I think that's changing too. We're seeing a
yeah,
lot more South Asians and Asians in creative spaces. And I know we have a long ways to go, but there's definitely a shift happening.
yeah. No, I agree, and I think it's headed in the right direction. And I love what you said, which is we don't have to throw out the baby with the
Yeah.
bathwater, right? It's
Yes.
additive, right? Like build on what we already have, the beauty of the things that we have, which are not in the West sometimes, right?
Yeah. And bring those
Community,
aspects,
yeah,
because it can be so helpful here too, where it's very I based. And we want to bring those collective aspects to this culture as well.
tr- yeah. The cross pollination is a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. So, if you were to offer one piece of advice to somebody wanting to start their solopreneur journey, what would you tell them?
Go 3 months at a time. Small baby steps of what you want to accomplish, and 3 month chunks are probably the most your brain can handle, because everything else will feel very overwhelming. So goal setting, if you are a goal setting type of person and you want to create XYZ, like 3 month chunks, so it's very digestible, and that helps eliminate overwhelm and burnout and all of those other things that you would set yourself up for if you're forecasting out a 6 months or a year or 2 years.
Yeah, no, I love that, because that also, you're right, because I think one of the biggest challenges is actually taking the leap. So when you break it down that way, you're not thinking, oh my God, in 5 years I want to be here, or in 3 years I want to be here, because that's overwhelming, and that could just be analysis paralysis also. So yeah.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered?
I think one of the things I always say is practice everywhere. So if self-advocacy feels difficult at work with your manager or your boss, like practice at home with your family where it's safer. So speak up just to practice, or speak up with friends that you want to go here versus there, that you want pizza versus Thai food, like whatever it is, that is an act of self-advocacy. And it's just like a muscle, just like we go to work out and we become stronger when we lift weights. It's like, this is a muscle. And if you practice other environments where it's not as scary, then you can practice in environments where it is perceived as scarier.
Right. It's going back what you were saying about Nick Hill versus I, right? I love that.
Yes.
You sort of
Yes,
build and then till you get to the big stage, don't try
exactly.
and do it on the big stage for the first time, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And that actually is a great way to go to our um, rapid fire round. What would you say is your solopreneur superpower and what's your kryptonite?
My superpower is being relatable. I think people can easily relate based on the stories that I tell. And so that's one of my, I think, superpowers, is to build that rapport and be relatable. And then my kryptonite. Oh, that's such a good question. Probably pushing myself too much and just taking on so much that I will burn. I will crash and burn. And then it takes me days to recover. So I think that's one of the things, is like pushing myself excessively about completing things that need to be done.
Okay, it's that perfectionism you were
Yes,
telling me about earlier.
exactly.
Complete this sentence. Most people think self advocacy is about dash, but it's really about dash.
Most people think self-advocacy is an individual act, but it's actually the most collective act you can do.
Love that. So, if you could have dinner with any entrepreneur, who would it be and why?
You know what I say? I would want to have dinner with all of the sharks on Shark Tank, because they are all entrepreneurs and they take on so many different companies and people and coach and mentor them. So I would want to have dinner with each one of the sharks.
That's a great. Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that. Um, Describe your ideal workday in 3 words.
Speaking, self-advocacy, and fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
You've got 30 seconds in an elevator or lift, as I say, with your younger self. What do you say to them, or what do you say to her?
I would say, I love you.
That's great.
Yeah, I would. I love you, and it's all going to be okay.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. It almost always is, right?
Yes.
Neelu, thank you so much. It's been so much fun chatting with you, and it's been a real pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Neelu's journey from corporate castaway to self advocacy champion offers powerful lessons for anyone building a business on their own terms. And her story is a reminder that your solo voice is not just your message, it's your business. Here are my key takeaways from our conversation. Your worst moments can become your greatest mission. Neelu didn't just overcome being escorted out by security, she reframed the moment as the foundation of her purpose. What looked like failure became fuel. Solopreneurs, your setbacks aren't just chapters to close, they might be the opening lines of your most authentic work. Find your training wheels. Neelu didn't start by scaling, she started by serving. Years of working inside other brands gave her the reps and clarity to craft her own IP. The path doesn't have to be an immediate all or nothing proposition. If you're not ready to build it yet, build within something else. Practice is not procrastination, it's preparation. The imposter monster thrives in silence. Neelu doesn't just name imposter syndrome, she disarms it. Her tools: move your body, get present, and speak your wins out loud, even in third person, until it feels real. Remember, you cannot think your way into confidence. You build it by showing up again and again, even when the monster is loud. Challenge the formula fantasy. Neelu emphasized there's no magic formula. The myth of one perfect post will unlock your success. Her biggest win came from an unpolished phone video, not a funnel. Stop obsessing over algorithms. They don't buy from you. People do. Be real, experiment, and don't wait to feel ready. Practice everywhere. Neelu reminds us that self advocacy starts small. Speak up in low stakes settings first, with friends and family, and your voice will get stronger when it matters most. Your business skills develop the same way. Selling, pitching, leading, it's all advocacy. Start practicing where it's safe so you can show up where it counts. Work in 3-month chunks. Neelu's best advice: think in threes. 3-month goals are long enough to move the needle, but short enough to avoid paralysis. Massive visions might inspire us, but they can also paralyze us. Solopreneurs, forget the 5-year plan. Try 90 days of focused action, then reassess. Thank you for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If you got value from today's episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another solopreneur who needs this message. Until next time, keep breaking free from the corporate grind. And remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.